When a country's economy reaches the breaking point, there is one institution almost every government hopes it never has to call: the International Monetary Fund. But here's something most people don't realize. Owing money to the IMF doesn't automatically mean a country is failing. Sometimes it's a financial lifeline during war. Sometimes it's emergency support after an economic crisis. Sometimes it's the funding that keeps an economy alive while difficult reforms take place. But there's also another side to the story. When does a lifeline become a debt trap? As of April 2026, around 80 countries owe money to the IMF, yet just 10 countries account for the largest share of its outstanding credit. And one country alone owes more than the next 4 largest borrowers combined. Using official data from the International Monetary Fund, we've converted all figures into approximate US dollars to make the comparison easier. Let's begin. At number 10 is Angola, owing approximately $3.5 billion. Africa's second largest oil producer has repeatedly turned to the IMF to stabilize its economy while reducing its dependence on oil revenues. At number 9 is Ghana, with approximately $4.1 billion. Years of rising inflation, growing public debt, and a weakening currency forced Ghana back to the IMF for economic support and reform. At number 8 is Bangladesh, owing roughly $4.2 billion. Despite being one of Asia's fastest-growing economies, Bangladesh sought IMF assistance to strengthen its foreign exchange reserves and protect long-term economic stability. At number 7 is Kenya, with approximately $4.2 billion in outstanding credit. Heavy infrastructure spending and rising debt repayments have placed increasing pressure on Kenya's public finances. At number 6 is Ivory Coast, owing around $5.2 billion. One of Africa's fastest-growing economies, Ivory Coast continues using IMF support to finance reforms while maintaining economic momentum. Now we enter the top 5, where the numbers increase dramatically. At number 5 is Ecuador, with approximately $10.1 billion. Although Ecuador is rich in oil resources, years of fiscal deficits, lower commodity prices, and external shocks have kept the country heavily dependent on international financial assistance. At number 4 is Pakistan, owing approximately $10.5 billion. Persistent inflation, currency depreciation, high energy costs, and recurring balance of payments crises have made Pakistan one of the IMF's most frequent borrowers over the past several decades. At number 3 is Egypt, with approximately $10.7 billion. Massive infrastructure projects, population growth, and regional economic pressures have significantly increased Egypt's dependence on IMF financing. At number 2 is Ukraine, owing approximately $15.5 billion. Ukraine's story is very different from every other country on this list. Since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, IMF assistance has helped finance essential government services while supporting an economy operating under extraordinary wartime conditions. For Ukraine, these loans are not simply about economic management. They are about national survival. And now, the country that stands completely alone. Number 1, Argentina. With approximately $60.2 billion owed to the IMF, Argentina isn't simply the world's largest borrower. It is an outlier. To put that into perspective, Argentina alone owes more to the IMF than Ukraine, Egypt, Pakistan, and Ecuador combined. So how did this happen? For decades, Argentina has battled recurring inflation, currency collapses, sovereign debt defaults, and repeated financial crises. Because much of its debt is tied to foreign currencies, every sharp decline in the Argentine peso makes repayment even more expensive. The result is a cycle where new borrowing is often needed to stabilize the economy while older debts remain. Economists often describe this as a structural debt trap. And that brings us back to where we began. IMF debt tells very different stories. For Ukraine, it has helped sustain a country during war. For Bangladesh and Kenya, it has supported economic stability and development. For Argentina, it reflects decades of recurring financial crises that continue to shape the country's future. Debt itself is neither good nor bad. Its impact depends on whether it creates a path to recovery or a cycle that's difficult to escape. So here's the question. Is the IMF primarily a financial lifeline that helps countries recover? Or can long-term borrowing create dependence that becomes increasingly difficult to break? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed data-driven rankings backed by credible sources, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more rankings that explain the numbers shaping our world.